everybody. Welcome to another episode of What a Hell of a Way to Die. It is me, Francis, and it is Nate. Nate, how's England? I think I got England weather here. It's weird, clammy, and it's gray, and it's just kind of misty. I feel like
Yeah,
I feel like there might be like some sort of I don't know,
there's some druids just hanging out doing druid shit like they do.
yeah, like a dragon's gonna fly out. Yeah, I've been reading Lord of the Rings too, so maybe I'm
I was
just
gonna
got too
say,
much
yeah.
shit.
It's fine. It's actually summery weather, but so apparently they're having really hot weather in on like mainland Europe right now, and there's also, as you may have seen, a weird atmospheric thing happening in which it's balls hot in Greenland right now and melting all the ice caps. So what they're expecting though is that some of the cold weather in the Atlantic and some of the hot weather from the continent of Europe is going to swirl up, and we're going to get some ridiculous thunderstorms. Which will be interesting because I mean I've seen a little bit here, but I mean most coastal cities that aren't in the American South, you don't typically get a ton of lightning and thunder here, so it'll be interesting to see that. But yeah, I am really not into it. Last week. So I did the calculations wrong when we did our dad chat about weather last week. So it was basically lows in the low 50s and highs in the like mid to high 50s and rainy. And then like that for June weather, that just seems fucking insane.
Well, here's my question about global warming that just kind of came up into my brain. So all of these other countries are experiencing problems, but it seems like England is still like this fucked up little island that is gonna always remain the same temperature no matter what. Like it's always gonna be, you know, 50s and 60s and gloomy, and everybody's already used to that. Like I feel like England and Britain in general is well prepared to weather climate change because it's just going to be still filled with like depressed people with pictures of sad children on their walls and shit, and just like some whatever it is that the Brits are really into, like making Downton Abbey. Like the world will continue to burn, and England will be like, oh, it's a bit of a hot one out there, bit of a, I don't know what the Brits say when it's hot.
Hot. I mean, it's the same language.
Bit of a smoking lorry out there or something.
So, I mean, there's a reason why they weren't complaining much about the weather in Children of Men. They just had all the other problems that are real. Yeah, so I think so last summer they had a heat wave here, specifically in southern England, but throughout the British Isles. And some of the concerns that they had were, number one, almost no one has air conditioning in their homes. Some businesses and like big buildings do now, but it's relatively rare. And one of the huge problems was you were seeing temperatures up into like in Fahrenheit into the high 90s. So when that happens, it's very hard to fucking have life function as normal, because obviously it's not like New York, which, has been air conditioned to hell. And New York is still insanely hot, don't get me wrong. But it's just when we moved here, we flew in on like the last day of the heat wave. And so the heat wave had just broken when we arrived. Like it was the first rain they had in a while, and it was like chilly. But the day before we arrived in London, they had been having weather that was the same temperature as New York, basically, but with zero air conditioning. The one exception to that is, at least in this last heat wave in the summertime, at night it cooled down. It got down to like into the mid to low 60s at night. But in the daytime, it was in like the mid to high 90s. So obviously, like that happens. The big problem they have here is brush fires in places like southern England, but central England more so, northern England even more so, and then obviously in Ireland. When it gets really dry, or in Scotland too, they'll have huge brush fires because all these islands used to be completely forested, and then over thousands and thousands of years of humans living here, they've cut down the trees and made them into farmland. And they have a lot of plants that that grow sort of in riot, and then when it's dry, fires break out, and it can be really bad. So I mean, I don't think the United Kingdom is going to be exempt. If global warming got super bad, there's basically very few cities in this country that won't be flooded in some capacity. Like Birmingham, which is about an hour north of here, will be like one of the only cities that's more or less untouched in its general region because it's on higher ground. But like all of the area where my mom's from would be underwater in East Anglia, and most of Southeast England would be underwater, to include significant chunks of London. So, I mean, if you got to that scenario, well, then like the Netherlands are gone and we're in fucking Mad Max. But I mean, yeah, it's an island in the North Atlantic, and so yeah, you get colder weather. Cynthia and I were joking about this, that sometimes it feels like you're living in either perpetual spring or autumn. But there's not really a real winter and there's not really a real summer.
I would
But
fucking love that.
I will say
that is the world I want to live in, where I'm never really hot or never really cold.
today it's probably I think it's something like in the low to mid 70s. But I mean, it's right around the solstice, so the sun is really intense. I just rode my bike in, and it felt quite warm. You know what I mean? It was nice, but it'll absolutely be coat weather tonight, like light coat, but you know what I mean. So that's our weather chat. I mean, it's interesting. It's weird because you realize like cities on the East Coast were built the way that European cities were built, and that people dress the way they did in Europe in a climate that's so much hotter. And I remember reading an article that somebody wrote about, like, as a kid, he had lived in New York City before the advent of air conditioning, and he was growing up in like the late 30s, early 40s, and was just describing how insanely hot it was and how people wore like formal British style business clothes, like suits and coats and stuff. And that he remembered meeting, he said people didn't wear shorts back then unless you were like a child. And he remembered meeting a guy who was from South Africa, and he was just baffled by this because he's like, this city is hotter than any city on the African continent south of the Sahara in the summer, and you all dress like it's fucking London. Like it's like no one wears shorts, and it's like the British Army in Singapore wore shorts because it's insanely hot. It's like it's weird. There's a part of America that sort of was built on the idea of pretending it's not as insanely hot as it actually is.
Yeah, I live in the palatial manor that I have, but it was built before air conditioning. So but it's got like, ceiling fans and transoms, and they did what they could to like cool it. They grew trees so that it would get shade. Like there's so many things that like I get when we moved in, we're just like, fuck it, put in window units everywhere, and then we'll maintain our coolness. But then like you take a look at it, it's just like, oh, they weren't like completely fucking stupid when they were building houses in the 1800s. Anyway, come by this giant fucking house and rid me of this goddamn nonsense while I go buy a house that's only 40 years old and has central air.
Yeah, I lived in a house in Bloomington, Indiana when I was in my last 2 years of college. That was built probably around the same time, like either late 1800s to early 1900s. And yeah, it was the same thing, like big windows, really high ceiling fans, etc. There's shade trees everywhere, and like it was decent, but like on hot days, there was just no fucking escaping it.
Yeah, there ain't nothing like when it's 100 degrees and fucking humid as shit because you're a couple blocks away from the Mississippi River. There's only so much that shit's doing for you. So.
Yeah, I thought you get a kick out of this. I'm not a morning person at all. You've probably experienced this with the 2.5+ years we've been working together. But the one place on this planet that makes me a morning person, it's the weirdest thing, is Hawaii. And the reason being is every time I've gone to Hawaii, obviously I get hit with jet lag, and it's really hard to sleep late because where I was staying with my friend, they didn't have air conditioning. So it's fine at night, but it got fucking hot by 8:30 in the morning. And so I'd wake up at like 5:30 or 6 when the sun was coming up, and I'd be like, oh, I want to go for a run because it's so nice out. And I'm like, I would never do that. But climate can do strange things to people.
All right. I think we've dad chatted enough. Let's go ahead and jump into what we have here. So recently, and I think I'd been hearing rumblings of this beforehand, but recently the Army has decided that there's just not enough chest candy for everybody, and there's a brand new award that is going to go along with the Combat Action Badge, and it is the Expert Soldier Badge. To go along with your Expert Infantry, Expert Field Medical, and I guess Expert Special Forces, I suppose.
No, special forces are allowed to do the EIB.
Oh, okay.
Like
gotcha.
if you're a special forces MOS and you deploy to combat, you get a CIB even if you haven't ever been an infantryman. And similarly, they train for and compete or can compete in EIB if they want to. But I've never seen an SF unit do it. But then again, I never spent time in an SF unit, and the base where I did my EIB didn't have an SF contingent. So who knows?
I don't we have enough shit to deal with right now? Then I don't know. Like this, and again, I've always been a demotivated, middle of the road soldier, regardless. Who would never go out for the, even if I was infantry, I'd never go out for the Expert Infantry Badge because it sounds like a lot of work, and I'm not all about that.
You don't really get a say in the matter, to be honest with you. Like when your base is doing EIB, if you're an infantryman, like you are expected to go out, and you will, if they think you failed out intentionally or that you're not taking the training seriously, because like the practice lanes will be like your life for a month beforehand, easily. If they think you're not taking it seriously, it'll make your life way worse. So there's like no real escaping it. You have to do it.
And see, the infantry, y'all, you only got anything better to do than when you're like training for the EIB is just training for your MOS. So like,
yeah, I mean, it's stuff that you want soldiers to know how to do.
Yeah, it makes
like
sense.
How to fix, how to load, fire, correct malfunctions, and resume firing on a 240 and a 249. How to disassemble and reassemble, perform a functions check on an M4 and an M9. how to do. Nowadays, apparently they've changed it out so you don't have to do headspace and timing on a 50 cal anymore. But back in those days, it was, load a barrel onto a 50 cal, do correct headspace and timing, and then there was another lane where you had to fire and correct malfunctions on a 50 cal. So I mean, these are all skills you want people to have.
Yeah,
for those how to read the phonetic alphabet, that kind of stuff.
For those of you not in the know, the 50 cal is not something you just pick up and shoot. If you do, you're going to blow the barrel out of the back of it.
Well, so it's the thing about the 50 cal, and this is just for our non-military or non-infantry listeners. So it's apparently changed, and they've got it so you don't have to do this anymore. But the 50 cal is a really old gun. Like the M2 50 caliber machine gun dates from around World War II, I think slightly earlier than World War II. And so it's such an old style of weapon. And I don't know the particulars because I'm not a gunfucker, but what I can tell you is that when you screw a barrel into it, there's a certain amount of space you've got to give the barrel based on it's just based on how the weapon works. Like for instance said, if it's too loose, it'll blow off. If it's too tight, it won't do the back blast enough. Like I call it back. Basically, there won't be enough back pressure on the from when the bullet fires to bring the bolt back to load another round. And so obviously it's a big ass gun and you want it to be able to shoot when you need it. So you had to use these things, the headspace and timing gauges, which were like, the best way I could describe them was that they were something between what do they call them, like spads, like the little thing that you use to pop stuff out of like computers or phones when you're doing work on like electronics, like a little tiny like almost like a dull chisel. And what these were was basically there was a gauge, and that was how you measured the space. And so I mean I'm not doing it particularly well because it's been over 10 years since I've touched this, because I did it on EIB and I never did it again. But like, that's a thing you kind of need to know how to do. And if you show up in country and your soldier's never fired a 50 cal or has never had to do headspace and timing on a 50 cal, you don't want him to be in charge of barrel changes. And the reason why you're doing barrel changes, in case you haven't heard this before, is that machine gun barrels will get very hot. And if you're in a sustained firefight, you can't be like, all right, guys, we can't shoot our most casualty producing weapon right now because it's too hot, so we're just going to let it cool off, and you guys just like throw some grenades or some shit. You have to be able to keep firing. And so in that case, what you do is you've got to swap in a new barrel, and you've got to do headspace and timing on it really quickly, but also correctly, so you can resume firing. Apparently they fixed that, but that was like a skill that they made people do, and that was the one that knocked a lot of people out. The really big one that knocked a lot of people out, though, was grenade toss, because it's just not a lot of people are good at throwing grenades.
No, you can't like throw it like a baseball. Like everybody thinks like, oh, you just kind of, two finger it and, but it hits, it rolls. Like you have to get like real close. Like you have to, because
you have to get within the circle.
Yeah, the kill radius on a grenade is what, like 5 meters, and then wound is 25. So I mean,
yeah, I think
you can get close enough in real life, but like for the expert, you got to be able to like fucking throw it in somebody's pocket and then have
so you have, if I remember correctly, you have a bunker or a pillbox kind of thing you have to hit it into. That's one of the targets. That's the closest target, and you've got to hit it into the window of the bunker or pillbox. For the next one's a trench line. You have to get it. It's a little bit further. You have to throw it, and it has to go into the trench. It has to roll into the trench somehow. So like that's obviously like a target you got to hit. And then your last one is troops in the open. It's just they'll do like a circle of engineer tape that's like you said, Francis, like a 25 meter radius. Or 10 meter radius. I can't remember, to be honest with you. And then it just has to, when it ceases rolling, it has to land in there. But here's the thing: when you're grading, when they're grading EIB, you can't look at where your grenade lands because you throw and you fucking take cover. So if you look up, if you pop up and watch to see where your shit fell, you very easily, you would be getting wounded in real life, potentially getting wounded in real life. So like you'd fail the lane if you did that. So instead, you throw it, and the graders tell you if you got it in or not. So chances are extremely good that if your company is grading you, which happened to be the case with my EIB, you don't know if your grenades land, so they just say, hey, you're a go or you're a not a go. Thus.
Are you an expert infantry?
Yes, I got my EIB. But I'm not. Let's just leave it at that and say I will not talk about any other things about it. The funny thing for me was that the two things, I was blade running the entire time, which means that you can't fail more than 3 lanes. I got really close to failing, but didn't fail in the end. And the thing that made me blade run was the 2 dumbest fucking things you could possibly imagine. I think this is the kind of grading that they do. They're like, oh, even if you got all of it right in principle, like if you missed one little step, you'd fuck it up. Oh my God, the 2 dumbest things I think I did were I forgot to pat my leg before I did the atropine injection for the Dawn protective mask thing. Like when you've been exposed to atropine, like that's one of the things you have to do. Like one is put on your mask, get it on in time, blow, create a seal, and the other one is give yourself an atropine injection, and you have to pat around your leg to make sure like it's unobstructed before you inject. I forgot to pat, and so that was one. The other one is really dumb. If I remember correctly, I put on the zeroing the PEC-2 laser. I forgot. I put the batteries in backwards. They're AA batteries. That's the kind of thing that happens. Like you can do it right 100 times, but then when you're under stress on the actual lane, shit can happen. So
this is what you spend
months training on this shit.
This is why the Claymore says front towards enemy.
Yes.
I mean,
yes.
People make fun of
if you remember it as like, oh well, the concave side is out and the convex side is in. It's like no one's gonna remember that in fucking combat.
I mean, like me, I would look at that and like I would be able to deduce that, but also if I didn't have well, no, that's exactly how it works. I'm like, I'm not setting this up because I might fucking blow my dick off. But yeah, like under stress, like even the AT4, like it has instructions on the side. So even if my dumbass picks it up, who hasn't shot an AT4 in 19 years since basic training, I'd be able to pick it up and at least figure it out and maybe scare a tank. So yeah, that's and you open those up, but it's like, I mean, it's got. See, I've changed batteries in so many children's toys that a PEC-2 battery swap would be no problem for me. You should hand that to the dad that's in your unit. Be like, come on, Sergeant, I need you to do the battery. Like, I got to do the headspace and timing, but I got to do the battery changes because I'm like, yeah, this is a lot like the Elena Vavalor guitar. Yeah, I got this, man. I'll just pop this off and pop a man, hit it with the screwdriver. You're good, dude. I got this in 3 seconds.
Yeah, I mean, so the thing I would point out about, I think your previous point is actually pretty correct in that for infantry, this stuff makes sense because these are all skills that you need to have as an infantryman. You're training on so they do it differently now, and they did actually change it while I was in the Army to like be basically you would test multiple events at once. It was like a big sticks lane, a situational tactical exercise lane. So you would have to like land nav to a target and then call for fire on that target, and then go in and like fire a weapon and correct malfunctions and so on and so forth. Give a radio report from the objective, like things along those like call in a 9-line medevac. You'd have to like get up on the roof of the building and then estimate distance. Using like a scope, like or binoculars. That's one of the lanes. You might have one where you have to, I don't know, like you have to get like part of the mission is you have to like be in camouflage, and so you have to like camo up. Then you like you make contact with an armored column or something. And you have to do hand and arm signals like for armored units and things like that. So these are all like skills that they found ways to change it and make it more like a sticks lane, but it's already changed a bunch. Like it changed 10 years ago. They were doing it the way I tested on, and now, which is basically the way my dad tested on it like 20 years prior, and now they've got a new way. So, I mean, in the grand scheme of things, this is soldier training, and I mean, an EIB or expert soldier badge or whatever the fuck they're going to call it, kind of training lane, it's good training for soldiers, but it's such a huge organizational requirement in the sense that when we were doing this, every NCO and officer who had their EIB, but officers during things like the PT test or the ruck march where they needed bodies everywhere, but definitely during the training lanes themselves, all the NCOs in the brigade who weren't like absolutely critically engaged at that moment were out living on lanes basically, all day, every weekday, training soldiers on how to do stuff like put up camo netting or put on camo paint, or call for fire, or throw grenades, or put on a gas mask, or so on. You see what I'm getting at? Like, so just imagine how much organizational energy that requires to do, and that's just for infantrymen in a brigade. Like, imagine doing that, but times, who knows how much if you're having like basically every soldier who's eligible test for this. And I don't know how expert field medical badge goes, but because I've never done that training, I was never working with medics like that, but I'm guessing it's similar, and that I imagine it also takes a shitload of people to be out there, if that makes sense.
Yeah. But again, for the expert medical, it makes sense. It makes sense that you would want your medics to go out for this. And if you go through it, it kind of makes sense. It's all of your warrior tasks. So I'm sure that they are going to be out there learning, they're going to have my PAO ass out there, like, on a 6 lane trying to fix a 240 or set up camo netting. But like there's also like every MOS, it seems, is going to have its own mission essential tasks peppered in. So like I'm just imagining like me having to run through like a bayonet course and then having to throw a grenade, and then immediately running up to a podium and having to do a press release, and like all
Yeah, I
under
was just
fire.
laughing about that idea. It's like
And then-
it's like you do a bayonet course and then you realize you bayoneted the wrong people, and so you have to do like some spin, do like a PAO lane where you have to like come up with a press release and a tactical press release in 5 minutes or fewer.
Right, and you think about the cooks. Are they going to have to crack open an MKT and cook you something really quickly, do a fast heat and eat, or do they just run through and make sure that everybody gets an MRE? Like, you know, every MOS is going to have something to do, something else to do with this. But I don't. It feels like this is again. It feels like the combat action badge. Like that one was easy because you're just like, well, if you're in country and somebody shoots at you, that's easy. We'll just give you the fancy little bayonet. But now this is going to require like everybody, because everybody's going to want this. Like anybody who wants to do like promotion points, like motivated soldiers who are non-infantry are going to be like, hey, I want this. I bet it's going to look good on my promotion package, or it's going to look good on an MCOER or whatever. So like they're going to have to go to their command and be like, hey, can you fucking set this up for us? And I just don't feel like a lot of commands are going to do that. Like I don't feel like the Intel community is going to push something like this as hard as like, because fuck it, maybe in like 15 years everybody will be really into this. But again, it just really makes sense that like if you're infantry to set up an EIB course. And this says that it's to find the top 1 or 2% across the board, for soldiers. But again, like that's just such a nebulous kind of idea when it comes to when you do something that's for like every MOS. So I just feel like this is they're trying to say is like, well, this isn't just a badge for everybody that anybody can get, but it kind of is, because now like everybody's just like it. Nate, I don't want to say it. I don't want to be the guy that says it, but it really feels like we're trying to do some sort of participation trophy bullshit here. Where, like if
All
you're
the other soldiers need a safe space because they're jealous of the chest candy. They have badge envy.
I mean,
and so they've decided they need their own special badge. It's sort of like the combat action badge, but for people who aren't deployed.
Kinda. I mean, come on, think about the combat action badge. Like, it feels like everybody's like, well, I got shot at too. Why don't I get a fancy badge? Like, fucking shut up. You weren't infantry. That's why.
Oh, shit. I didn't realize. So this is me just like ignoring every picture on military.com or Army Times because I assume it's just some dumb boomer ad. But wow, I didn't realize that the badge was legitimately going to be the bayonet and grenade from the cab minus the wreath.
Yeah.
So it's just going to be, it's just like CIB, EIB. Wow.
Yeah, they're just
so
doing...
for people who are confused about this, friends, partners, listeners, when you get your expert infantryman's badge, it's like the infantry musket, and it's like the long rifle in a box, basically. That same badge with a wreath behind it is what you give to infantrymen as basically a sort of, you've been in combat, you've been deployed to combat, you got shot at. What the conditions under which you get your combat infantryman's badge or CIB really depend. I mean, some units, especially in the early days of the war, would just get them because they deployed. So every single person who was 11 series or infantry series who deployed to combat, when they came back from deployment or during the deployment, they would do this as a ceremony. They would give them their CIB because technically they'd been in combat. But then down the road, units started deciding like, no, actually, unless you were in a firefight, or you got shot at, or you got, you received incoming, it didn't count. So you had to like be in contact to get your EIB, or correction, your CIB. The Marines still kind of do this, I think. If I'm not mistaken, like their combat action ribbon requirement is that you not only be shot at, but then return fire as well. It might be you have to only get shot at. I'm not sure.
Because there's circumstances under which I should like possibly have a combat action badge, even though I've never like fired my rifle outside of the range. I've taken incoming. I've had to do. So I get. I'm with that on like you should be taking direct fire, not just like getting some rockets launched at you or whatever. I don't know. Again, I don't give a fuck. Like it's chest candy. It's another thing I have to. It's another thing I have to fucking measure on my uniform every time I put it on.
Because like if I had to count, like I wouldn't be able to count on both hands and feet the number of times that we had mortars or rockets land in Afghanistan, but only a couple times were those close. Now I definitely had moments where bullets came very close to me, or when RPGs came very close to me. That was scarier, and was close enough to have my doors and windows blown out when a bomb went off. So like that's pretty scary. But I mean, did I return fire? No. I mean, in those situations, those were like the people that were shooting at us or the people who detonated the bomb. They were so far away. I mean, like. If the Afghans were shooting back because they just shoot everywhere when shit goes off, so it would have been kind of fucked up for me to just start shooting because I mean, what would they be shooting at? But yeah, I mean, like for me, technically, when you think about us getting mortared, I think I got mortared for the first time like within my first 10 days in Afghanistan. But I didn't get my CIB until December of the year that I was deployed. I deployed in February, and I came back in March of the next year. So February of '09 to March of 10, I got my CIB for action that took place on the 11th of December 2009. So the whole 9 months, 10 months I was in country. Stuff had happened, but I mean, because of the way the paperwork works, I hadn't been put in for an award. And then the shit went down in December, and I did. And so it's like, but I guess we're on a tangent here about awards. But like, if I was an infantryman coming back from deployment and not having a CIB, it'd be kind of weird in the sense that, I mean, it happens to some people, but it would sort of imply that I'd never been in combat, like I'd never been in action, if that makes sense. But obviously, the way that it was done in years past, everyone would just get it. And so, like some people never left the FOB and they have their CIB. But then again, it's like, well, maybe you never left the FOB, but if like a fucking rocket blew up your TOC, I think you were in combat. You know what I mean? Like, it's kind of hard to turn around and be like, oh, this person wasn't in combat when like literally they've had incoming destroy their building. You're like, that's kind of fucked up.
It's like the Bronze Star now. The Bronze Star doesn't mean shit. If it doesn't have like a V device or an M device or whatever.
Wow.
On it.
So we have to clarify that, don't we? Yeah. So the Bronze Star medal. I have a Bronze Star medal because it was my end of tour award for the year that I spent in Afghanistan. If I had gotten what's called a Bronze Star for Valor or a Bronze Star with V device, what that means is that I was awarded a Bronze Star for action in a particular situation, and that's a Valor award, and that's definitely something special. Whereas, in my brigade, it was pretty common for people E7 and above, but certainly all commissioned officers, unless they were fuck ups, to get a Bronze Star for the deployment.
My last,
with some exceptions, because I mean, like some guys, like they just got screwed on paperwork, and that does happen. But I got mine for a deployment. So like for me to be like, I'm a Bronze Star winner, it's like, well, yeah, technically, but that doesn't fucking mean shit. Now, if I had a BSMV or if I had a Silver Star, that's a whole different story. That's like absolutely a Valor award.
Yeah, I didn't get a Bronze Star because somebody in my section had been in the Army 6 months longer than me. So he got the Bronze Star because they're like, we're only giving out so many Bronze Stars, and we're doing it based on, like, they were giving anybody who had been on a deployment, never been on a deployment, you would get an RCOM, and if it was like your second or third or whatever deployment, you would get. They put us in for MSMs, which is what I wanted. An MSM, the Meritorious
Service Medal.
Yeah, the Meritorious Service Medal is like RCOM Plus, I guess, Army Commendation Medal Plus. It's like, the Bronze Star is supposed to be like for infantry dudes who do cool infantry stuff and do great and wonderful things. The MSM is like the Bronze Star for Pogues, and it's like, well, that one.
Oh, I don't know about that. I feel really bad because I had an NCO that was really squared away and worked wonders for me, but he was actually like not even technically an NCO until the end of the deployment. He was a breveted E4 wearing E5 rank. That was like our sergeant major's decision to make him an NCO. And because of his rank, I had two NCOs that I really respected, that I worked with very closely. One was an E6, one was an E5. The E6, the staff sergeant, got promoted to staff sergeant while we were deployed to Afghanistan. So I would put him in for his Bronze Star, and because he'd done the job of a platoon sergeant for basically the entire deployment. And our adjutant, NCO, and the sergeant major were like, "Sir, what needs to happen is if we put him in for this award, as a sergeant E5, he's going to get turned down. It's going to get downgraded to an MSM because he's not high enough in rank, because that's just how the system works. Yep. But if you wait until he pins E6 and we submit it with a letter of lateness, we'll make sure it gets signed, through the brigade, and they'll probably award it to him." And so that's how we wound up getting him his BSM, was basically waiting till he promoted to the correct rank, even though like his job notwithstanding, he did a phenomenal job and he should have gotten it no matter what. They literally weren't willing to accept it. I mean, that was just my brigade. I can't say that's the entire Army, but similarly, that E5, who was technically an E4 until he actually pinned E5 downrange, they wouldn't accept his BSM commendation, and so they downgraded it to an MSM. Yeah, and I was like, fuck's sake, man. And he was like, "Sir, I got an RCOM for Iraq. I was in Iraq for 14 months." He's like, "I'm used to this shit."
Yeah. But First ID, when I was there, the brigade that I was with under First ID was like, we're not doing any MSMs. It's either Bronze Stars or RCOMs. So like my unit was just like, I mean, this is how we're going to do it. It's not fair, but sorry.
I remember when I was in the Q course. So an RCOM can be awarded by a brigade commander, and an Army Achievement Medal can be awarded by a battalion commander. And I remember that. So the head of the SF school, the regimental, not the regimental commander, but rather the head of like the training regiment for SF can award RCOMs. And so like I remember in some of the formations in the Q course, You know, like this guy was in like one of the junior NCO training courses for special forces trainees, and he had gotten like the highest PT score, and so they gave him an ARCOM. And one of the soldiers' information, he was like, "Wow, that's really nice. You did well on the PT test. I got an ARCOM for a deployment." And it's like, yeah, man, different strokes for different folks, apparently.
I mean, that's why, like, after I got that ARCOM, and we're on a real tangent, but fuck it. After I got that ARCOM, that's when I like completely lost faith in the military award system. Not because like I was mad that I didn't get a Bronze Star, but we had it, but like just because it was just such a stupid, like they were like, yeah, the first ID says they're not doing MSMs. Why? Fucking why? Well, because this, that, like, but why? Like, this doesn't make any fucking sense. Like, just give MSMs for us POGAS motherfuckers, and you can give Bronze Stars to all the E7s and above, and then we'll all fucking move on with our lives. But, like, it's just such an arbitrary rule. And like you said, like, we can't, you know, if we put him in, he's going to get kicked back because he's literally just not the high enough rank, which is true. Like, you can get an ARCOM with a Valor device on it if you're like an E4. And, like, I can't think of a more kick in the dick thing than to be like, hey, we're going to give you a fancy ARCOM rather than just a Bronze Star, even though you should deserve a Bronze Star, but because you're like an E3 or an E4. Like, that's just, you know, the award system is just weird and fucked up to me, and based not on, you know, any kind of merit or valor, but based on what your command wants to do. Like, I got an AAM for an annual training one time. And the Army Achievement Medal is like the lowest medal you can get. It's like, you got your certificates of achievement, which I think used to count for promotion points. I don't think they do anymore. And then like the first, like the lowest tier of award of a medal that can be awarded to you for doing a good job is the AAM. And I just was like, why, man? I don't want to stand up here and then shake the commander's hand and do all this. It was family day when they were handing this out. There was like 15 of us, and it was like, well, you set up tents really well. Like, but I was just an NCO. I did my NCO thing. Don't give me this shit. Like, but fuck it. They put me in because my, I guess because like they're just like, look, everybody else is fucked up, but you weren't, so you have a medal for it. All right, I guess. So anyway, expert soldier badge. I'm for it, whatever. But I just don't. It feels like, look, it feels like the new PT test, right? The ACFT. I'm having to start training on the ACFT. My annual training's coming up, and we're going to have to be doing stuff on the ACFT. But we don't have any of the equipment for it. We don't have any way to like start doing it. And like for us reserve soldiers, there's really no fucking way that we can go about doing it, unless we get like, I don't have chin. I need to do a pull up, or like some leg tuck or whatever. We don't have chin up bars at my reserve center. We don't have any bars or anything like that. We have to like, you know, put in a thing and have contractors come out and build this thing for us so that we can now do the PT test. So where do we get like the time to do that versus where do we get the time to do, you know, these kinds of things? And I know, you know, infantry, generally active duty, though National Guard has infantry. Medics, though, you've got active and reserve medics, but I'm sure they set up times. It's like, okay, we're gonna you know, get you some training dates, or we're going to do our annual training, and we're going to do it specifically so we can train for getting the EIB or the expert medical, which again makes sense. Makes perfect sense. But for the rest of us, like, I don't know, when do you? I don't even fucking think we have camo netting. I don't know how to put that shit up. Like, how do I practice on this stuff? How do I become an expert soldier, man? I don't have any of this shit. Like, we don't even have fucking M16s, man, or M4s. We gave them all to a unit that deployed to AFRICOM. So how do I practice my functions checks? Like, we have, we have.
Oh my god! Please, tell me you have like M1s.
That would be phenomenal. We're not that fucking old, but I will tell you that our the vault in our building no longer works. So we had to send all of our, like, literally every weapon had to be pulled out of our vaults for every unit in my building and sent somewhere else. And if you think that we've got a contract out to have that vault fixed, I also have a bridge to sell you in San Francisco. But you know, we have crew serves, but nobody fucking knows how to use those crew serves. Like, we have to bring somebody in to teach us how to use our 240s, because guess what? We don't take those out. We don't do anything with them. So, I don't know. Again, it's one of those things where just, you know, the reserves are going to get the shaft, and that's just kind of the way it is. So, fuck it.
I'm extremely glad that I'm not in the reserves or in the military, but that's just me. That's just your boy here, just living my best life in England.
Doesn't the engineers have like the sapper tab? Is the sapper tab a thing that you have to earn? Like, isn't that like a special?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, you have to go to sapper school, and it's not easy.
Right.
I never gone, but sapper school is famously like comparable to ranger school in its difficulty. I don't necessarily know if people get as broken off or starved in sapper school, but like they definitely have to do a lot of very hard physical things to include extremely long ruck marches. And if I remember correctly, there's also some elements involved with like identifying and being able to perform functions checks like disassemble, reassemble non-US weapons. So it's definitely a hard school.
Okay, so that's not just engineers. Anybody can go.
Anyone can go. And famously, before they opened up Ranger School to women, Sapper School was open to women. And so that was like the school that, the hard-charging female soldiers wanted to go to because, unfortunately, the Army was sexist and was like, this school is basically the same as Ranger School in a lot of ways, but Rangers get really, really butthurt when they think about women wearing the tab. So we can't let you, but you can go to this school. So speaking of things that are weird and involve people being butthurt, we have another incredibly relevant and pertinent story to our experience, or rather to my experience, and I'm being a solipsist, because after a review, U.S. Forces Korea has decided to lift its curfew. Infamously, the bane of your existence if you lived in South Korea, if you were stationed there. You could not be out between 1 and 5 a.m. You had to be back in the barracks or back in your hotel or wherever you were staying. Now, South Korea is a place that goes hard every night of the week. You can always stay out and do stuff, but they would have courtesy patrol to go arrest anyone who looked like a Joe or anyone who didn't look Korean, to include English teachers who I knew who had like beards and were not from America, who were getting hemmed up by the courtesy patrol, which would typically be a joint U.S. MP and South Korean civilian police or South Korean military police. So the weird thing about this is they used to have free reign in the different zones or areas of Korea. If you're in the north, not North Korea, but rather the zone north of Seoul up to the DMZ, it was called Area 1. Particularly soldiers in the brigade that I was in, which was a 1st Brigade 2nd ID at Camp Casey. That area was constantly like you were getting the shaft. You had zero or very few freedoms. It was very challenging to get out. They basically wouldn't allow you to have any kind of base liberty. So most people, if they could leave to go out and go drink or go hang out, they would hang out in the city of Donggucheon and not go to Seoul. But Seoul itself, which is a really cool city, if you've got time and money, if you were stationed in Area 2 at places like Yongsan, you absolutely could go out and party, and they didn't have a curfew. But then in the early part of this decade, in 2011, 2012, and 2013, there were a bunch of high-profile incidents committed by American service members in Korea. There was an American soldier in 2ID who got 5 years in prison in Korea for trying to import spice through the APO system. There were 2 separate incidents in which American soldiers attacked and either attempted or did commit rape on South Korean citizens. In one case, it was a soldier who broke into an apartment building and attacked an old woman. In 2002, the U.S. fucked up really bad and accidentally ran over 2 schoolgirls on their way on their way to a birthday party in a town north of Seoul, like near to where Area 1 or near to where I was stationed. And this touched off basically a huge wave of protests against the U.S. military presence that led to the U.S. renegotiating the status of forces agreements in Korea. And so what that meant was that now, under the current SOFA, which was renegotiated in 2002, if you commit crimes of a certain severity, you are no longer going to be punished under the military justice system. You will be handed over to South Korean police and to be prosecuted in Korea, and you'll go to Korean prison. So, for example, like my battalion was constantly technically overstrength because we had to account for the soldiers on our rosters who were in Korean prison.
Wait a minute.
I'm not kidding.
Wait a minute. How does that work? Like, do I still get paid while I'm in Korea prison?
I don't think so.
And
I don't think you...
I guess so. Like, you just have to kind of hang out there, and you're just like, well, when you get done, like, that's weird.
We'll kick you out of the military and deport you. Yes.
I figure that you'd fall under UCMJ too. So like once you're done with Korea prison, you'd go to UCMJ or military prison of some kind.
Yeah. So basically, I think that when you get convicted, the reason why you're still in the system is because you're still in prison. Once you're released, they kick you out of the military. And obviously that final bit is handled under UCMJ. But long story short, also one of the other incidents that I didn't mention was this had happened right before I moved to Korea. Some soldiers went around with an airsoft gun, shooting people out of a car with airsoft pellets in Seoul, and the police freaked out because they thought someone was going around threatening someone with a gun. They got in a car crash that wound up breaking the leg of a South Korean police officer, and one of the soldiers got shot by the Korean police. It was the first time since they'd established the civilian police in South Korea that any one of them had discharged a weapon. So obviously that's a huge high-profile incident. And then when I got to Korea, the week after I got to my unit, there was an incident in which on one weekend, like two separate incidents of two ID soldiers punching and beating up Korean police and like smashing things up for no reason. And then an incident in which guys got in like a bar fight, and a South Korean national stabbed an American soldier and like gutted him, in a fight over, basically in a fight over a drunk soldier trying to like intervene in an argument between another soldier and his wife, who was a Filipino who worked in South Korea. And this led to some misunderstanding that led to a Korean pulling a Bowie knife and gutting a soldier. Needless to say, they were like, yeah, fuck all this shit. And they put us on lockdown. And the curfew had been in effect since 2012, since the incidents of the soldiers attempting to rape Korean civilians. But there was zero chance they were going to get rid of curfew, even though the reason why so many soldiers get UCMJ in Korea is because of curfew. And so as a result,
because they're breaking curfew, not because they're doing something illegal.
Exactly.
Okay.
They're because they get caught out past curfew, and there's so many opportunities to get caught out past curfew, and like especially with junior soldiers, if you're an officer or you're a senior NCO, you don't have CQ or charge of quarters in your barracks. You just have to. Your only concern is whether or not A, you're on the base, or like you get caught by the gate guards, or B, if like someone in your command knows that you're out past curfew, unless you get caught by the cops. But for junior soldiers, the problem is not only do they have to be back in before curfew, but they also have to sign back into CQ in their barracks. So it's really hard to get back in if CQ thinks you're missing. You know what I mean? And so there's so many opportunities for soldiers to get UCMJ in Korea, and then they wonder why soldiers have like dog shit morale in Korea and why there's so many UCMJ problems. So this is good. I'm glad they're doing it. I'm hoping. I mean, I couldn't see anything about this in the Military Times article that you shared with me. I'm obviously hoping that they apply it across the board, because something tells me they'll probably do the thing where like Area 1 isn't allowed to be out past curfew. The one thing I'd say about it that's funny, and this is just a word to the wise if you're a soldier stationed in Korea, if you're clear, like if you've got a pass and you've been cleared, etc., and you're out, if they're still doing courtesy patrol, just remember that there's only certain areas in Seoul and in like Tongjucheon and areas around bases where courtesy patrol can even legally patrol. That the courtesy patrol only exists as an agreed thing with like bar owners and business owners in those various districts. So like in Itaewon, of course, you're going to see courtesy patrol. That's a constant thing. When I was there, places like Hongdae didn't have it. And if you can make friends with people who like English teachers or people who are Korean citizens, people who aren't tied to the military, they can point you to places where you can hang out, and like as long as you're not like out on the street being a dumbass, you won't get caught. And then 5:01 a.m. you can walk out and it's fine. They can't do anything about it. But my God, you really don't want to play with it shit, because like it's so easy to get caught. It's so easy to just get caught. Like they don't think that you've made it into the line. Like if you're not in line to get back on base when it hits 1 a.m., then you're technically violating curfew. And like they love to hem up soldiers for that. So, needless to say, Korea sucks to be stationed in, and I'm glad they're doing this. But if I were to tell you the number of stories of just the ways in which people would do dumb shit just to fuck with soldiers, just to have the chance to hem soldiers up, I'll give you a quick one. I used to have a commander, and he didn't have a social life, and so he was the HHC commander, and so I'm not kidding. He would go through randomly the passes of all the passes of his soldiers that he had approved for that weekend, because you had to list on your pass like where you were staying, where you'd made a hotel arrangement, and like what the cell phone number of like who was the point of contact. But then you also had to list in your pass application the names and cell phone numbers of every single other person that you were going to be going with, and you had to have like a battle buddy everywhere you went. So this commander, I'm not kidding, would wait until 1:30 or 2 in the morning every Friday and Saturday night, and then he would pick a random pass and call, and he'd be like, all right, all the people listed on your pass, and he'd talk to every single one of them. And just like make sure that they're all in the room with you. Can you imagine?
Yeah, actually I can. But we're all surprised that like people in the army want to fuck over other people in the army. Like I just like, and that's, like you said, the the big thing that people get hemmed up for in UCMJ is probably this pass issue, of course. And this is like commanders and MPs. Like MPs are cops. Cops. People
Yes,
that are
they
cops.
are.
People that are cops and soldiers. Imagine how shitty of a human being that has to be.
No, 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 no,
Sorry
no, no,
for
no, 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 troop cop.
sorry for all of our MPs out there. But I'm sorry. If you were in a patrol car and being a troop and a cop at the same time,
Not even
no.
Mark Wahlberg can stop you. Wow, that's an incredible energy.
Right. If you can legally arrest Mark Wahlberg, that's a power that nobody else can claim. So, uh, yeah, and then of course, like you said, a command, like just like it's 2 o'clock in the morning, man. Like, and this is me even when I was younger. If I'm out drinking, I come back at 1 o'clock in the morning. I'm gonna eat my fucking top ramen and go to sleep. And then just
Yeah.
like get a phone call and be like, you have to go and wake everybody up because the commander wants to talk to you about fucking what, man?
About what? Why are you up at 2 a.m., sir? What the fuck?
Like that's a person. And here's the thing: like Korea sounds like it sucks for everybody, but just in different ways. Like, and the only for your junior enlisted and your lower ranking officers, like it sucks, but at least you can drink. And for your higher ranking people, it sucks, but at least you can take your anger out on everybody who's below you, I guess.
On your subordinates? No, I mean,
Yeah.
honestly, man, Korea was my favorite and least favorite place to be stationed. It was the worst place to be stationed in the Army, but it was the best place I lived in the Army. I absolutely fucking love Korea. It's a complicated place and it's a challenge, and you have to. The buy-in is very high to be like a functional person if you're not from Korea living there. But I mean, absolutely loved it there, and I'd love to go back and visit. Like, I absolutely adored that country, but it sucks being a soldier there. Also, soldiers don't like Korea, and they get treated like shit, and so they wind up treating Koreans like shit. And I have zero sympathy for soldiers that abuse Koreans, or even just like fuck with their property. Like, absolutely fuck you. The people who go in, they treat it like, we used to joke about this, that because you can drink in public in Korea, there's no open container laws. You can people will pass out on the street and no one will fuck with them. Like, you can kind of like, there's an expectation that it doesn't have to be said, you just aren't going to do it. Does that make sense? Like,
Yeah.
there's an expectation that like you're going to follow the rules, and the rules don't have to be plastered everywhere, and they don't have to have the cops running around to enforce them. And the joke that we had about American soldiers, and just to some extent American expats or Western expats, but certainly American soldiers, junior soldiers, was that it was like the rats coming off the boat on the island of Mauritius and finding all these dodo eggs and just eating the shit out of them all day long. Like, God, these are so good. You'd think they'd make a law to make this illegal. Just fucking eating all the eggs, and the dodo birds are just like, I don't know what's happening, but they're eating all our eggs. Because it's legitimately, they just are. I don't know. I don't want to be reductive about soldiers, but like a lot of junior soldiers treat the Koreans like shit. They when they get sentenced, when they get stationed in Korea, like their uncle is like, well, here, bring a carton of Marlboros, you can buy some hookers. It's like the fucking currency over there, and they just go over expecting it to be like this boomtown, like GI boomtown, when it's like one of the wealthiest and most developed countries on earth. And the Koreans, aside from old people who love Americans, most Koreans are indifferent at best to American soldiers. In most cases, they fucking hate them because everyone their age has some story of American soldiers being assholes to them. You know what I mean? And so I understand why they had the curfew, because they didn't want the U.S. forces to get kicked off the fucking Korean peninsula. But it's one of those things where, to me at least, like my affinity is for the country of Korea. If I deep down think that the U.S. should just not be there. But that's one of those things where it's a whole different can of worms to crack open to talk about that, because there are definitely Koreans who want Americans there. There's definitely Koreans who want more Americans there. But by and large, as time goes on, the support for the U.S. presence there has gotten less and less. And every time some American soldier does something stupid, it makes it even more fraught. And let's be perfectly honest, most of the dumb shit American soldiers were doing happened off base between the hours of 1 and 5 a.m. But fuck curfew, fuck courtesy patrol, fuck all police. I'm very happy that the soldiers who are there right now have some freedom. Hopefully they don't take it away. They're going to take it away because someone's going to do something stupid. But regardless, enjoy the freedom while it lasts. Go, if Roots Time is still open in Hongdae, go there. That place fucking rules. And just enjoy your time. But just bear in mind that Korea Whew, those big bottles of soju that cost like 3,000 won, like they seem so good, but they're so bad for you. So just be careful.
Yeah, I never got to do Korea, but Korea sounds like one of those things. It's like, for people who don't deploy, you have Korea, and then everybody's got a Korea. Everybody's got a Korea story. Everyone's
We'll
like,
always
oh,
have Korea.
that year I spent in Korea. Oh, like you make
Oh, but
references
Jesus
to
Christ,
things that I have
fuck's
no
sake,
idea.
dude! If you talk to some of these guys who were there like before 2002, before the Yangju Highway incident, the stuff they talk about, like it makes you think like, okay, yeah, like it was probably a lot of fun to be a single dude with zero morals, but like it was probably very bad. And there's a reason why Koreans hate us. When you just hear the stories about like just the drunken fuckery, just breaking shit, driving drunk, like endless prostitution everywhere, like just the extent to which, guys were telling me stories like, oh yeah, we'd go down to the whorehouse and like there'd be our chaplain would be there, like those kinds of things. Like it was really bad. And so needless to say, I loved it there, but also like I studied the Korean language. Like I stayed there after I got out of the army to like go to school to learn more Korean. Like I loved Korea. And I would happily go back for a while. I definitely would not want to live there for the rest of my life, but I would definitely like spend some time there if I could. I feel like telling this story, you just have to understand that to the outside, American media and American commentators and such, people in the military paint this picture in Korea that there's 28,000, 29,000 U.S. service members, and they're holding the line on the DMZ. And if they left tomorrow, the fucking Zerg rush would come down from North Korea and destroy South Korea. When in truth, we don't patrol the DMZ at all. The only American troops on the DMZ are the ceremonial battalion that do like the look hard and fucking wear sunglasses and flex at the North Koreans like at Panmunjom. Most American soldiers are just like the overwhelming majority of American service members in Korea are in logistics positions just as a sort of like skeleton footprint. So if they had to scale it up and bring in units for a war, they could. But South Korea's military handles South Korea's security. We're just there because it's like a legacy of the Cold War. And
which feels like a lot of our bases. Like I understand us being in Germany. I understand presence in various countries, but like South Korea really just like or Japan. Like why do we need to be in Japan? Japan handles their own shit. But it's like, well, we've always been here. Like, but like I don't want to be like.
Obviously, I think that we want to have a listening, but we want to have the ability to project force towards like, the sort of neoliberal imperialist shit is that we want to be able to project force towards China and Russia. And obviously, like there's the argument made that if we weren't there, that that stuff might break out between, say, China, Korea, Japan, Taiwan, etc. But I think that's also a really reductive and honestly kind of patronizing way of looking at it, in the sense that, I mean, Japan, sure, like Japan might invade China again. Who knows? I doubt it, because the entire fucking global economy hinges on China at this point. Similarly, Korea and Japan, as much as like they might hate each other along nationalist lines, like they also like making money a lot more than they like, trying to sink Japan or recolonize Korea.
Yeah,
and
say what you will about capitalism, it has probably stopped a lot of conflict where people are just like, but I make money off of you, so we won't do some 1930s bullshit and try to like run rampant all over your country because you guys make all the stuff. So and we don't want to have to try to control 1 billion Chinese people that we're taking over. So why don't you guys just abuse your own people? We'll abuse our own people, and then we'll all make a little bit of money at the end of it.
Yeah, exactly. And there's a whole other thing. Like maybe we can get some actual Koreans to come on and talk about this. Like there's this whole concept of referring to Korea as Hell Joseon, because like it's such a bad place to live. If you're like a working person, the working conditions of the average person are really shit there. So it's like this wonderland if you're a foreigner and you have lots of free time and you're making money like teaching in a hagwon or teaching in a university. But if you're an actual Korean working, like it kind of sucks. The minimum wage is like $4 an hour. Like it's just it's not good. So yeah, I mean there's so much about this that I guess brings it back to this question of why do we even have troops there in the first place? And I think the reason we have troops in Japan and we have troops in South Korea is that we want to be able to be this globe bestriding empire that projects force everywhere. And also there, like you just said, Francis, there are huge financial, commercial, capitalist reasons in the sense that the the local economies of many of these towns, there are a lot of people who make a lot of money off the U.S. military presence, and they don't want the troops gone. So these host nation governments are always kind of balancing between, we want to not lose favor amongst our electorate who, gets angry when American soldiers act like fucking animals and destroy things, but then also we don't want to lose favor amongst the small business owners, our true constituents, who make a ton of money running, bars where, and I'm not joking, there are bars in like the special foreigner zones in Tongducheon where they won't let Koreans come and drink. And I'm dead serious. I've known Korean American U.S. military people who've gotten kicked out of these bars because they're like, no, it's foreigner only. It's Americans only. And they're like, I'm in the U.S. military. And they're like, yeah, I'm sorry, but you're Korean. You can't be here. Like, so that's the level of like,
that's a
it's
wild
insane.
Racism there.
Yeah, exactly. And it's fucking, it's because they want to make money off Americans, and they know that if you have a bar with a bunch of drunk Korean dudes and a bunch of drunk American dudes, fights are going to break out. And so they're like, yeah, we'll just ban Koreans in Korea. It's insane. But it's one of those things where I've never understood it, other than the fact that like people make a shitload of money off of this. And similarly in Germany, there are towns, where the U.S. military drives a lot of the economy. And I think that we're there in these places because of a combination of like Stephen Miller style people who graduate with degrees in international relations, and the fact that a bunch of small business owners make money off the U.S. military in these countries. But to me, at least, my experience in Korea was one that I'm like, I like Korea enough that I hope for a day when they stop fucking drafting every single Korean male and they don't have to have compulsory military service and we don't have to be there. And so that would be awesome if it happened, because it's a wonderful country. I just wish it didn't suck so bad for Koreans who live there. Anyway, we kind of went on tangents today. We dadded out hardcore. We're like, we came up with a plan, and then we're like, no, fuck it. I'm just going to yell about shit.
That is, I think that's the real thing that keeps us separate from all the other lefty podcasts, is that this is not only military podcast, but this is dad chat. Like, we could probably branch off another podcast from this, just be like a monthly dad talk. You're not even a dad, but you are in dad mindset, so it works.
Oh, Jesus Christ. You have no idea. Like, I don't know how to make of that, because on one hand, it's funny, and like we used to joke about it, but then like once people who don't know me through this show started making jokes about my like dad tendencies, I was just like, I don't know if I like this though.
It's like, here's the thing. What it is that, everybody. The thing is that anybody, even if I didn't have a kid, I'd be in dad mindset because I'm 36 years old. Right now, I've been moving and everything, right? So I got this big house I got to prep to show. I'm in so much pain from like moving stuff and lifting things, and I make noise every time I sit or, stand up. Like shit. No matter what I'm doing, like my movements always require me to groan. Like that is, and if you just think about like, man, like the other day, my wife and I were just like, oh, it's been a fucking week. Let's just, sit around, watch TV, and drink a shitload of vodka. And I did, and I didn't get really drunk, but I got like nicely drunk, and I woke up the next day hungover. I'm just like, oh god damn it, this is why I keep myself to just a couple of shots, in my water, my fizzy water with some ice, like you hit a point where you're just like, I'm not 20 anymore. And the thing is that people who are in their 20s who are still drinking like they hate themselves and are still staying out and still eating garbage ass food, like those people like look at you like, oh wow, you're a real dad because like you take care of your shit. It's like, I have to, otherwise I will die if I don't. Like if I don't wake up and stretch in the morning, like this morning before the podcast, it's almost 7:40 in the morning for me. I got up, I did some stretches because like, man, my back's hurting. I'm gonna be doing some more movement today, so I better stretch out and make sure that maybe go take some Advils and stuff. So it's not really like dad mindset is that like mid-30s mindset where you're just like, man, I need to, I want to make nice food for myself, and I want to take some time to relax. I want to read a good book. I want to maybe I just want to sit for an hour, just sit and watch a little TV and just relax and not drink natty ice until fucking 2 a.m. Like, so that's your dad mindset because people in their mid to late 20s haven't gotten there yet, and it's alien to them. So that's all it is. I mean, once you have a kid, even that as well. I'll invite you into the dad chat that I'm in.
the formal induction into dad world.
Look, let me dad you on this, and I'm going to put this out for everybody. If you're thinking about having a kid, just start, because it's going to take a minute. It's not like, more than likely, it's not going to be like a goddamn, teen high school movie where, like you have sex once and then oops, a baby pops out. Like, it took my wife and I a little bit of time. So if you're thinking about it, just, start trying for it, because it's probably not going to happen immediately. So unless you're like 21, and then you're probably already, fucking like rabbits and probably super fertile. But for the most part, that if you're gonna have kids, all of you out there, if you're thinking about having kids, let me tell you something. One, you'll never be ready for it, so you might as well stop trying to be like, oh well, this, that, I gotta get this, just fucking get pregnant, have the kid, and then you have 9 months, and that like frenzied like franticness is what's going to make you end up like getting your shit together, and you will only ever have your shit together about 75%. The rest of it is kind of beyond that. So for you, Nate, and for all the people out there who are wanting to have kids, it's great. Having a kid is awesome. If you don't want to have kids, that's fine too. I'm not going to say that everybody should have them, but also, yes, you should definitely be like, if you want to have a kid, start doing it, because this is not, I don't know, what's some.
It's not a lifetime special,
right? It's not like you're gonna have a kid and then like you're gonna all of a sudden start going to church and shit, and this isn't a Lifetime original movie here. We're not getting Dean Cain in here to be the dad who's like mad, but then like just like, this is a blessing. No, this is real life. So start trying to have your kids now.
All right. Well, we've filled an hour with some real dad chat. So thank you everyone for listening. And as you know, we do have a Patreon where we have slightly more focused bonus content. We also have a bunch of things like shirts, and I think we should definitely plug very hardcore the zine and the swag that Francis will send you if you sign up at the $10 tier.
Yes. So we sent out our first one. It had some Posadas buttons. It had some Gadsden flag, no step on Sneck, and some rock or something magnets. Now, once I get done with this hell world that is moving house, and once this house is sold and I am in my smaller house and a little bit more settled, all of those things will be available on our website as well. I am hoping within a month to have those. So you could buy them individually. You would be able to buy the set. But we will have those. But if you want things sent to you early, you got to get on that $10 a month on patreon.com/hellofawaytodie, and we'll send it out this month. If you are wanting to, I haven't really put it out there yet, but this month is going to be radicalization, and it's for anybody who is military or civilian, whatever it is that got you into being a leftist, getting into being a socialist, whether it was military, whether it was not. Send us those stories, 5 to 1,000 words or so. And we're going to get that out hopefully August, I think, is what I'm shooting for. So, and I've got some designs. Yesterday I was day drinking a little bit, and I made some Starship Trooper images, but from the perspective of the bugs, like the the air defense artillery being the plasma bugs shooting the Roger Young out of the sky and shit. All right. So with that, thank you everybody. Follow us on Twitter. Send us your shit. If you got questions, you got concerns, you can follow me at Army Strang. Follow Nate at In These Deserts. Get up on YouTube if you would rather get your stuff on YouTube. We have the website hellofawaytodie.com, in which I generally have longer show notes as well. So please. Feel free, and we've got, as Nate said, shirts. We have all of those links in the show notes for you if you're interested in any of that. And as for that, we'll see you next week.